Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Commander video. This time I want to talk about my picks for the 8 best competitive EDH cards coming out of Modern Horizons 2. Very much like the previous Modern Horizons, you get a lot more competitive cards in here. So there's definitely playability in this set, but before I get into the video, I want to first remind you that most of you who are watching right now are not actually subscribed to the channel. So I would really appreciate it if you took the time to hit that subscribe button. And also if you want to support the channel, go check out my Teespring store. I have the recently added Wasabi design there. So that's a cool way that you can support me, and I appreciate it so much. Let's start it off here with number 8, Cyphers Harvest's Hand. Now, Cyphers or Cyphers, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but card draw engines are always good, especially ones that are cheaper. You know, you can get it out there early on, and it can have an impact the whole game. I think Cyphers has stronger potential as a competitive EDH commander because there are just so many good stacks enchantments, and you can just play them over and over again. You can keep drawing cards, gaining life, and stay in the game longer. Is it a strong commander option? Not necessarily for competitive play, but any kind of commander that can draw you cards easily, you can get her out there earlier. I think she has a ton of potential. You just have a lot of strong enchantments in the competitive EDH arena, and Sterling Grove just got a reprint, and that's a good example of one. Get a lot of good enchantment tutors as well, so it definitely has potential, although not going to be super strong. And then number 7, we have Yusri Fortune's Flame. Very similar reason for why I have Cyphers on here. Yusri will also get you more card draw. It's very similar to a lot of the risk and reward that you see already when you draw cards and lose life. You could potentially draw a bunch of cards, you could potentially draw a few and lose a lot of life, but that's just the risk that you take in a lot of card draw that's cheaper. I think the potential is definitely worth it. I think a lot of people are going to experiment with a coin flip strategy in blue and red. Again, kind of a similar deal here, not going to be super competitive, but any kind of commander that can potentially draw you a ton and also give you the benefit, if you're able to win those coin flips, to cast cards for free. I think it definitely deserves some sort of consideration for competitive play. And then number 6, we have probably the most competitive Planeswalker in the set, Dakin Shadowslayer. All of these abilities are good. I don't think it's going to see a ton of play again lower here on this list. It's more of a niche card, but one that I think is definitely useful. All of these abilities, surveilling's never bad, even if it's not going to net you a card, that's still going to be useful in some competitive decks. Obviously, exiling creatures is always good, no matter the format, no matter the competitiveness, and bringing an artifact card back from the graveyard or cheating one into play from your hand has a lot of competitive potential as well. All of this only on a 3-mana Planeswalker, which definitely gives you your value for your mana's worth. So again, nothing here that's going to blow your opponents away, but it's just solid value for the mana, and there are a ton of competitive decks that can totally fit in a 3-mana Esper colored Planeswalker. And then number 5, we have probably the commander option that I think has the most potential for competitive EDH. But then again, we didn't really get any knockout commanders here for competitive play that I think are gonna just take over the format. But Garth One-Eye, the fact that you can combo pretty easily, and once you get to comboing, it's almost a guarantee that you win, because you have, out of those 6 cards, a way to win, no matter the situation. All you really need is a haste enabler and some way to constantly reset your Garth. If you're able to do that, you can get infinite Black Lotuses, you can then get infinite Shivan Dragons, and then just attack with all of them that have haste. Okay, that doesn't work for you. Your opponents have some sort of ghostly prison or whatever. You just draw a bunch of cards until you get to your other alternate win con, or you just destroy the enchantment that's stopping you from attacking them with your disenchant. It's just a Swiss Army knife here of a commander. 5-color commanders just tend to be a bit more competitive on average because of the pool of cards you have to choose from. You could play literally the most powerful ones no matter how competitive your commander tends to be. That being said, again, I don't know if this is going to match up well against Golos or Kenrith. It depends on how quickly you're able to reset Garth, and I think needing a haste enabler is going to set him back a little bit, but should be a ton of fun to experiment with nevertheless. Number 4 here, we have Grief. Now this was very difficult for me because I personally don't see myself playing any of these in competitive play, but there are specific competitive decks that do focus on hand destruction, they focus on discard, and while it's not exactly the most powerful thing in a multiplayer competitive game, basically getting for free a Thoughtseize that you don't have to pay any mana for, you just have to discard another black spell, I think that's still pretty valuable. Grief just seems to be the most straightforward and competitive card out of those elemental incarnations. So again, this is going to be very niche, but again, most of the cards in here, it's depending on what deck you throw them into, whether or not they're going to be powerful. So number 3, we have another good example of this, Profane Tutor. Profane Tutor, it depends on the deck, right? If you're playing mono black, I think it definitely consider Profane Tutor. It's a turn 2 play that the risk involved here is enough to keep it out of a lot of competitive decks, but there's still going to be some that look at a 2-mana tutor even if they have to wait for it as an upside. Because okay, you then search on a later turn, you get the card you're looking for, maybe your opponents aren't expecting that, and you have your whole turn's worth of mana to then use that spell. So you don't have the advantage of timing, you don't really have that reaction advantage of playing it and then getting the card you need immediately right then and there, but it's a tutor, you don't have to reveal the card you search for, and you get it straight to your hand. So the spell you get is exactly the same as Demonic Tutor, it's just the suspend thing is holding it back. And I didn't even want to consider Soul Talisman, because it has to be worth waiting for. And there's no deck in competitive EDH right now that wants to wait a few turns for 2 extra mana. Number 2, we have Esper Sentinel. Now we're talking about cards that I think are going to see a ton of play, not just in specific decks, although if you're asking yourself whether or not you want to play this or Mystic Remora, you're still probably going to want to play Mystic Remora, because that card's ridiculous even with a cumulative upkeep. But Esper Sentinel can get you card draw each one of your opponent's turns if they play a non-creature spell. It's easy to pay an extra mana, but do they always want to do that? So I think at the very least it's going to slow them down, and you always have the potential of giving it more power so that you increase that tax. This also makes it more likely that if you're going to play competitive EDH with fewer colors, let's say if you want to play mono-white competitive EDH, Esper Sentinel is an option now. You get more card draw, and that's how you make colors more competitive. You give them more resources, more resource advantages. Now before I go on to number 1, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Sanctum Weaver is a pretty good mana dork. I could totally see this in those Cyphers competitive EDH decks, or any deck where you play enough enchantments to warrant playing this, because Priest of Titania also sees play because a lot of competitive decks just tend to play a lot of elves. So if you have a 2-mana mana dork that can tap for a bunch of mana, kind of like a Bloom Tender, you're almost in Grim Monolith territory, where if you can untap it, you have ways of generating a bunch of mana. Gaia's Will is another example of Suspend just not really being that strong. The card is promising. If you're able to get to it, it's basically Yawgmoth's Will, but in green. But this is all depending on whether or not you're able to take advantage of Suspend cards and not having to wait that long. So if you can Cascade into them, they're going to be pretty strong, but Cascade is unpredictable, and having cards that are unpredictable, it doesn't really work out as well in competitive Commander. And I was tempted to put Ragavan Nimble Pilferer on here, just because it gets you that treasure earlier on, and that's certainly an advantage. But I think this card would be better if it were a partner commander. Honestly, I think this would be one of the better cards that you could play in competitive EDH if you had the partner option, because then you would be able to play more than just one color. So number 1 here, it shouldn't be any surprise. Ignoble Hierarch, the best mana dork in this whole set, and probably the best mana dork we're going to get all year. A 1-mana mana dork that taps for more than just green is an automatic include for so many competitive decks. I mean, this is what you're looking for. There are a lot of decks that settle for Boreal Druid, so if you can imagine, you have a mana dork that can tap for black, it can tap for red and green, and you have Exalted, yeah, that's definitely going to see play. It's not going to introduce anything new to the format, yes, of course, but it is going to see a ton of play. It's just, we know what it's going to do, it's incredibly reliable, and it is going to be a staple. So anyway, let me know what you think about these 8 cards here. These are the cards that I think have competitive EDH potential, and this is all my opinion, of course. Feel free to disagree with me. But if you haven't already, please subscribe, like, comment, share, hit that notification bell, leave a comment. Void here signing off. Have a wonderful day.